QMTV's Meet the Candidates now meets Emilie Tapping, who's in her second year as Vice President of Academic Affairs at King's College London and is also Chair of the Audit Group. Welcome to the programme, Emilie.
Thanks.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, thank you.
What is the role of a students' union?
Well, I've learned a lot about student unions in the last 2 years, and from my perspective, the role of a students' union is purely representative in that, well, a students' union to me isn't an organisation. A students' union is the students. So realistically, it can be anything it wants. But I think the main role of a students' union is to represent students both nationally, locally, and essentially just be a voice.
What do you think makes a good ULU Vice President? And why do you think you're more qualified to do this job than any of your other candidates running?
I think ULU plays a really big role, not just for the University of London colleges, but also representing London more generally. We have very specific problems in London and very specific problems for University of London students. London's a hard place to live, it's expensive, and I think that the voice of the 200,000 students that there are in London needs to be heard. The role of the Vice President within University of London, I think, is that as the University of London gets smaller, as more colleges get their own degree awarding rights, I think it's the VP for ULU needs to take control and help make sure that the smaller specialist colleges and the ones that really rely on the University of London name don't get dropped out and lost.
Now, engagement in ULU is low. What do you think it's doing as an institution that's wrong?
I think it does come back to the fact that most students are relating more heavily to their own institutions now, as opposed to University of London. The University of London name, does hold less weight, I think, than it used to. So obviously engagement's going to be low in something that you don't really consider yourself to be a part of. But I think it's about winning fights. It's about winning, rights for students in London. And if ULU can be seen to be doing more for all students in London, then I think engagement in ULU will go up.
Now, how do you improve sports societies and facilities at ULU?
I have a bit of a plan specifically for small and specialist sports teams and societies. I want big unions to kind of adopt the smaller unions, so that I want to lobby Bucks leagues and continue with the ULU leagues to make it so that those people can play competitively. And in terms of societies, I think that there's a big role for ULU to play in connecting up all of the different societies. I don't think the networks are big enough, and I don't think they do enough work together.
And what would be the key internal campaigns that you would run?
Within the University of London?
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of things like Senate House and my big campaigns with journals. Lots of big university conglomerates at the moment are campaigning against the unfair prices in journals. It's really affecting a lot of postgrad students in particular. And I think that University of London...
What do you mean by journals? Is this e-journals or...?
Well, journal subscriptions from libraries. Okay. So each institution pays a huge amount of money towards journals, and the prices are going up and up and up. So rather than doing anything about it, the universities are just cutting the amount of journals available. So one of my big internal campaigns is to make it so that all of the University of London universities work together to kind of combat this.
Now, what qualities would you look for in a president to complement you as a VP?
I need someone who's flexible, who doesn't necessarily want to stick too strictly to the role descriptions, because I think it's better that we play on our strengths and what we're both able to achieve. And I need someone who's willing to compromise and possibly, take on board some of my ideas as well as their own.
Does that mean that you would therefore do some things in the end, if your strengths played to them, that were actually presidential in their remit, and that the president might do certain things that were vice presidential in remit because you were playing to your strengths?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's quite an important part of being a team. I think that you're able to kind of do what you're best at rather than try and do what you're not very good at if someone else is better at it.
Okay. What I mean, we can't name names because it contravenes ULU regulations, but I mean, how do you think that the current VP has done this year in the job?
I think that there are some very difficult circumstances, and I don't want to use that as an excuse because it's been a really tough year. I know that the team had problems. Having worked the year before quite closely with ULU, I think that they did a lot more to kind of build the name of ULU, and they did a lot more to make it more kind of applicable to the everyday student. They did a lot more kind of lobbying MPs and politicians and things, and I think that that's really been lacking a little bit this year.
Okay, so let's turn a bit more specifically to you, and you say in your manifesto that you want to bring ULU back to the average student. Mm-hmm. Who is it with at the moment?
I think at the moment there's obviously a big activist base. I know the Coalition of Resistance and the Education Activist Network are really taking off at the moment. I don't necessarily think that the Vice President of ULU, or indeed the President of ULU, needs to be the person kind of spearheading that sort of thing. I think that the average student also wants to see things to do with transport prices, housing prices, and all those other things that really affect them in the here and now, as opposed to kind of in the future.
I mean, will you end up still being able to reach out to those students that you describe as the activist type base of students?
Yeah, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive at all. I think that because the base is growing so well, and actually I think quite independently, at King's, the Education Activist Network's pretty big, and it's done pretty well without too much union support. And I think that they're not mutually exclusive. I think we can definitely do both.
You pledged to lobby the Mayor of London to make London cheaper for students. This is quite a big promise, but is it actually achievable? If so, how?
I think, as far as I can tell, there's not really been much talk about the 2012 mayoral election that I've really picked up on. I've been quite heavily involved in politics for the last few years, and we've worked with the Lib Dems and Labour Party for the last 2 years. We haven't worked with the Tories, but it's not something that I wouldn't do if it meant getting things cheaper and better for students in London. It is a big promise, but we've managed to get student fees top of the agenda. We've managed to get quality and widening participation top of the agenda nationally. There's no reason why, if we don't push hard enough and don't get enough people behind us, we can't make students in London top of the mayoral agenda.
I mean, you say you wouldn't work with the Conservatives unless, but you would be happy to do so if it meant that you got London cheaper for students. Are you not working with, or seeking to try and work with, the Conservative Mayor of London at the moment?
Well, no, I didn't say that I didn't say that I wouldn't work with her. I said I haven't been working with him for the last year. But I haven't really, because it doesn't really, it's not really applicable to my role at the moment as Academic Affairs Officer.
Sure.
But we have tried to work, within the team, we have tried to work with Boris Johnson, but we haven't really had any responses. I've also tried to work with David Willits, and again, he's not been very responsive to us.
So to come back to the actual question, is your pledge to make London cheaper for students, working with the Mayor, actually achievable?
Yeah, I think it is. There's nothing to say why it wouldn't be.
Other than that, you haven't actually got the definite support base yet of the London Mayor.
I know, you've got to start somewhere, haven't you?
Sure. Okay. Emilie Tapping, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.